In 1960, the world of organized crime was irrevocably transformed. No longer could the shadowy figures of the underworld lurk unseen. The dawn of cutting-edge technologies marked a new era in the battle against these clandestine empires. On my channel, we will delve into each epoch of organized crime, exploring every decade with vivid detail, from the rise of Prohibition-era gangsters to the zenith of their power. Central to this saga is the figure of Al Capone, a name that epitomizes the era like no other. Under his command, the Chicago outfit emerged as a force utterly unlike any other organized crime syndicate. At its inception, there was one veteran mobster, Big Jim Colosimo, who, despite his standing, clung to the outdated methods of the past. Recognizing the need for a new direction, Frankie Yale was dispatched by Johnny Torrio, along with underworld luminaries such as Lansky, Luciano and Costello, to confront Big Jim. The old-timer's reign ended with a bullet, clearing the path for Torrio's ascension. However, it was a young, fearsomely ambitious mobster named Capone who would rise from the shadows to seize control. Capone was not merely ruthless, he was a formidable figure of danger with a formidable reputation. Those who dared to cross him, refusing to engage with his operations, found themselves mercilessly sidelined. His influence was not confined to illicit activities. He had an iron grip on the political landscape of Chicago as well. Prohibition turned these men into billionaires, their fortunes built on the vast sums funneled into corrupt political machines, with Illinois standing as one of the most corrupt states in America. Al Capone masterfully orchestrated a revolution in organized crime, crafting a formidable structure that not only thrived, but dominated the underworld from its inception all the way into the 90s. Many dismiss Capone as merely a brutal mobster, enamored with brute force and ruthlessness. However, Capone was a strategic genius, meticulously appointing a cadre of not just hardened killers, but also sagacious men who were adept in navigating the murky waters of politics, money laundering, casino operations, Hollywood, and more. This intricate network transformed the Chicago outfit into a veritable KGB of the Mafia world, possessing clandestine knowledge about every influential dynasty, both criminal and political, and wielding it with devastating precision. Under Capone's shadowy influence, his empire expanded westward, infiltrating California. Here, established crime families that had taken root in the 30s and 40s fell under the sway of the Chicago outfit. The notorious Jack Dragna family and Mickey Cohen, and even members of the New York Mafia, found themselves answering to Chicago's ironclad grip. The outfit's dominance in the gambling rackets was unyielding, exerting a stranglehold on street-level operations. In the 30s and 40s, fortune favored them immensely. Following the downfall of Al Capone, Paul Ricca ascended as the new chieftain of the Chicago outfit. Yet the turbulent waves of the 40s scrutiny were far from subsiding. The notorious Hollywood extortion case did not merely lead to the downfall of Frank Nitti. It also paved the way for the incarceration of numerous high-profile members of the Chicago outfit, including their then-leader, the formidable Paul Ricca. Amidst this chaos, the only stalwart ally Ricca could count on was a former bodyguard of Capone himself, Tony Accardo, who was famously dubbed Joe Batters. Accardo, with his ironclad loyalty and seasoned prowess, was left to steer the remnants of the once unassailable empire through its most tempestuous times. In 1929, the Atlantic City Convention witnessed the formidable presence of Jake Guzik and Al Capone, two titanic figures in the world of organized crime. By the 1932 convention, Tony Accardo had risen to prominence, tasked with overseeing the security for the entire gathering, a testament to his burgeoning influence. At this pivotal event, Accardo and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel formed a close alliance, setting the stage for future operations. Simultaneously, Paul Ricca, alongside Jake Guzik, was engaged in clandestine maneuvers with Charles Lucky Luciano to sway the presidential election in favor of either Franklin D. Roosevelt or Al Smith. This high-stakes political game also involved intense negotiations with a cadre of influential figures: Huey Long, Tom Pendergast, Nucky Johnson, Frank Costello, Joe Adonis, Santo Trafficante Sr., Vito Genovese, and Meyer Lansky, among others. Al Capone, though already imprisoned by this time, had previously played a crucial role in these strategic gatherings. Before his incarceration, Capone had been a key participant in a critical meeting orchestrated by Luciano to establish a new order of organized crime following the fall of Salvatore Maranzano. At this historic assembly, Capone was prominently accompanied by Jake Guzik. Not long after this, Capone himself would face imprisonment for tax evasion, marking yet another twist in the tumultuous saga of the mob's grip on America. Upon Capone's death in 1947, and with Paul Ricca's imprisonment in 1943, Tony Accardo ascended as the undisputed chieftain of the Chicago outfit. He was not alone in this rise. A council of seasoned crime lords, meticulously selected by Ricca and inherited from Capone's legacy, flanked him. This new era under Accardo marked a distinct departure from the usual tumult that characterized organized crime landscapes elsewhere, particularly within the fractious New York families. There, rivalries and deep-seated animosities simmered beneath a veneer of camaraderie, with plots of betrayal, greed, and envy constantly weaving through their interactions. In stark contrast, the Chicago outfit was a monolith of unity and mutual respect. Their empire, sprawling and rich, fostered a culture where greed and opportunism were foreign concepts. Within their ranks, there was no plotting or backstabbing. Such was their solidarity that when Frank Sheeran, a member of the Bufalino family and a confidant of Hoffa, was sent to Chicago, he found a brotherhood so tightly knit that discerning the bosses from the soldiers was nearly impossible. Each member, regardless of rank, treated one another with the highest respect and shared a collective passion for food that often turned their meetings into lavish feasts. This unique harmony within the Chicago outfit not only set them apart from their counterparts, but also solidified their legacy as an indomitable force in the underworld. Tony Accardo transformed his stature within the Chicago outfit to such an extent that he not only took full control of its operations, but also exponentially increased its profits. Moving beyond the gambling operations of Capone's era, he commandeered national racing wires, forging alliances with various newspaper outlets, thereby expanding their influence. His strategic move into Texas, alongside alliances with the Carlos Marcello outfit and the support of an ambitious young gangster named Sam Giancana, allowed the outfit to extend its tentacles into the heart of Middle America. This expansion was not just about spreading their criminal enterprise, it was about domination. Slowly but surely, Accardo's network developed a stranglehold that reached from Illinois to California and across the vast plains of the Midwest. This vast territory funneled immense wealth and influence back to the outfit, facilitating their entry into elite circles and allowing them to mingle seamlessly with various communities. When traveling, these mobsters shrouded their identities, never using their real names, and eluded law enforcement with ease. However, as their fame and the scope of their empire grew, so did the intensity of the spotlight on them. By 1957, Accardo faced relentless surveillance and harassment. His every move was documented, and although he was repeatedly arrested, he never faced prosecution or saw the inside of a prison cell. Yet, the constant harassment began to wear on him, marking the onset of a potential decline. Previously, Accardo could navigate through cities and states that were Mafia strongholds with impunity, protected by a web of mob corruption. But as the protective shield began to fracture around 1957 and 1958, the once untouchable mob boss found himself increasingly vulnerable. The era when Accardo could operate freely was drawing to a close, heralding a new and uncertain chapter for the powerful Chicago outfit. In the 70s and 80s, a venerable cadre of mobsters who had weathered the stormy days of Prohibition still wielded significant power. Known as the higher-ups, these figures included Tony Accardo, who had been a stalwart since the days of Capone and Luciano, alongside Carlo Gambino, Vito Genovese, Carlos Marcello, Santo Trafficante, and Russell Bufalino. These men had not only survived the tumultuous early 20th century, but had thrived, amassing fortunes so vast during Prohibition that they ascended to the status of legitimate billionaires. Shrouded in secrecy, their names were seldom whispered in public, allowing them to lead opulent lives away from the limelight. Despite their ostensibly legitimate lifestyles, these magnates remained true mobsters at heart. Their newfound wealth enabled them to restructure their criminal organizations, promoting former bodyguards and loyalists to positions of power such as bosses or captains. These transitions were not merely titular, but came with substantial autonomy. Although the higher-ups retained a crucial role, providing political protection and leveraging their deep-seated corruption. In return, they demanded only a fraction of the profits from the ongoing street operations, a testament to their inability to fully detach from the lucrative allure of illicit earnings. This shadowy echelon of mob leadership, while immensely powerful, often operated outside the official ranks of the National Commission, wielding influence through a covert network that offered immunity from prosecution, a kind of invisible shadow government. Their existence, barely touched upon during the Kennedy administration in 1960, hinted at a profound underworld influence that extended far beyond the public's understanding. By 1957, Tony Accardo was eyeing a transition into this elite circle, having observed the seismic shifts in organized crime dynamics. With Frank Costello and Luciano stepping down, and a new, more ruthless generation rising in New York, figures like Carlo Gambino and Joe Colombo and Sam Giancana in Chicago, Accardo aspired to position himself as a shadow boss. His strategy involved using his legitimate wealth to offer unyielding political protection, positioning himself as a benefactor and protector to the mob, while allowing Giancana to be the visible front boss. This move epitomized the evolving nature of organized crime, where the lines between legitimate power and underworld dealings became increasingly blurred, crafting a new era of mob governance driven by both visible leaders and those who pull the strings from the shadows. In the late 50s, Tony Accardo, alongside Sam Giancana and Accardo's trusted doctor, journeyed to California to explore potential investment opportunities and assess the operations of crime families under their influence, including the Jack Dragna family. Their trip, initially a strategic move to expand their rackets, took an unexpected turn when they were arrested not upon their arrival, but as they prepared to leave. This arrest underscored a stark reality for Accardo. They had been under surveillance the entire time. This pivotal moment crystallized for Accardo the changing tides of his reign over the Chicago outfit. Confronted by the agents during his arrest, he declared his intention to withdraw from California, stating, "Believe me, I'm leaving." What he implied, though more silently, was a deeper resignation. "Believe me, I'm retiring, and I'm done with this." However, Accardo's departure was more than a retreat from California. It signaled the beginning of a transition toward a new, more aggressive era for the Chicago outfit under leadership he would soon appoint. Yet Accardo could not have anticipated the turbulent path his successor would take, leading to an outright war with the Justice Department. By 1965, this conflict forced Accardo back into the fray, necessitating his direct intervention to stabilize the organization. The complexities of operating within California highlighted a significant challenge for the Mafia. While organized crime had always been a part of the state's underworld, California's proactive stance against such activities made it an exceptionally tough nut to crack. This resistance was driven by a determined approach to tackling organized crime head-on before it could entrench itself further. Despite the visible efforts to curb Mafia influence, what eluded investigators and magazine narratives alike was the deep-seated connection between Hollywood, unions, and gambling. a nexus that remained stubbornly tied to organized crime. These ties, woven through decades of covert relationships and financial entanglements, ensured that organized crime's shadow over California, though challenged, was far from erased. In 1965, the Saturday Evening Post unveiled a riveting exposé that delved deep into the Mafia's fierce struggle to penetrate the seemingly impenetrable bastions of California and Los Angeles. This landmark article painted a vivid portrait of the ongoing war on organized crime, a battle characterized by relentless pursuits and cunning resistance. It offered a comprehensive historical overview of the era, capturing the essence of the turbulent 1960s, a time when the very fabric of American law enforcement was being tested by the sinister reach of the Mafia. This article emerged at a critical juncture, just 3 years before the tragic demise of Robert F. Kennedy in California, the visionary architect of this formidable crusade against organized crime. Kennedy's untimely death would later be viewed as a dark omen, marking the high stakes of this relentless fight. His legacy, deeply intertwined with his fearless confrontations with Mafia dons and corrupt power brokers, added a poignant layer to the narrative. The Saturday Evening Post article, therefore, was not just a recounting of events. It was a dramatic saga of good versus evil, underscoring the perilous path of those who dare to challenge the underworld's mighty empire. For all their precautions and attempts at secrecy, the 3 travelers from Chicago might have been CIA agents. First, they gave false names when they bought their plane tickets: Michael Mancuso, S. Waite, and S. Mann, and then they boarded the airliner separately. At International Airport in Los Angeles 3 hours later, they were quietly met by 2 other men, and all 5 drove in a large black car to Perino's restaurant for a dinner conference. They returned to the airport and, as they stepped from the car, they were stopped by officers of the Intelligence Division of the Los Angeles Police Department. The officers had been watching the 3 Chicagoans from the moment they arrived in Los Angeles. The encounter took place several years ago. At that time, S-Man, better known as Tony Accardo, was boss of the powerful Chicago Mafia organization. Michael Mancuso was Sam Giancana, soon to become Accardo's successor as overlord of the Chicago mob. S. Watt was Accardo's doctor. The 2 men who met and conferred with the 3 were the late Frank Strongy Ferrara, then the underboss in charge of the Mafia's gambling operations in Chicago, and the notorious Anthony Pinelli No, to the LA police as the Chicago mob's resident agent in California, and today a fugitive from justice for federal income tax evasion. The 5 men were not arrested by the intelligence agents. These were merely taken in for questioning. When the questions were over, the intelligence men called in the press. The 3 visitors begged to be let go without publicity, offering to board the first plane to any destination. Giancana, after a tantrum, observed with resignation, "Now that everyone will know I'm here, I can't do any business, so I might just as well go home." Accardo's remark was more revealing. "I'm just passing through," he said as he pleaded not to be exposed to the press. "Believe me, I do not want no part of Los Angeles." One of the strangest of the strange circumstances surrounding the Mafia in the United States is that most of its members similarly want no part of Los Angeles. Although they operate freely in nearly every other major American metropolis, they have labeled Los Angeles a no-man's land. With its wealthy and expanding population, the nation's 3rd largest city would seem fertile territory for the Mafia's illicit operations in narcotics, prostitution, gambling, usury, mayhem and murder. But as ex-Mafia member Joe Valacchi sadly reported to the McClellan Committee, "We have only a very weak family out there." Since the 40s, when the city was in the iron grip of Mafia boss Jack Dragna and his allies Bugsy Siegel and Mickey Cohen, Los Angeles has had only one authentic gangland murder, compared with an average of 50 a year in Chicago, and all the Mafia's attempts to establish a strong hold in the rich province have failed. In 1962, for example, the Gallo mob in Brooklyn, harassed by the New York police and the rival Profaci gang, began to think of relocating en masse to a less perilous environment. With that in mind, they sent a probing mission to Los Angeles. The advance team was composed of Louis Lefty Castiglione and Michael Rizzi Rizzitello, both of whom had long criminal records in New York. Upon their arrival in Los Angeles, they checked in with Nick Licata, one of the three men considered to be the head of the weaker Los Angeles family of the Mafia, and received Licata's permission to operate. Along the way, they also picked up local mafioso, Anthony Zurica. The Castiglione-Rizzitello Zurica operation was crude. In fact, says Inspector of Detectives Henry Kerr, it was so rudimentary that we could only conclude they were testing our defenses. At about 2 in the morning on a Sunday or Monday, they would enter a bar whose cash register was overflowing with money from the weekend business. They would pistol whip the cashier in full view of the staff and patrons, then warn them not to talk to the police under pain of revenge from the rest of the Gallo mob. They were easily identified by the intelligence division of the Los Angeles police and promptly arrested. Then came the typical Eastern Mafia tactics. Witnesses were relentlessly intimidated. Some had wheels fall off their cars, and a high-priced lawyer was flown in from New York to handle the cases. In Los Angeles, however, the Mafia tactics failed to work. On November 8, 1962, all three mobsters were given life sentences, punishments far more severe than the New Yorkers had ever expected, and the Gallo mob has not been heard from in Southern California since. Experts believe the Mafia deliberately sacrificed Castiglione, Rizzitello, and Zurica just to see what the reaction of the Los Angeles law enforcement authorities would be. The reaction of the authorities has been consistently the same for more than a decade, and one Mafia intrusion after another has been rebuffed. Certainly there is crime in Los Angeles, but it is not of the cancerous Chicago, New York, Cleveland, Cosa Nostra type. Certainly, there are individual Mafia members living in the Los Angeles area, but they have not been able to organize the kind of massive crime complex that can take over as the second government of a city. The principal reason is that Los Angeles has an extraordinary police department. Former Attorney General Robert Kennedy once described it to me as probably the finest and most modern in the United States, if not in the world. Unlike other cities, many of which are only now beginning to copy its methods, Los Angeles conducts its operations against the Mafia like a full-scale war. The key echelon in this war is the police department's 50-man intelligence division. On the wall behind the commander's desk is a large map of Sicily, the homeland of the Mafia. Down the hall is a sprawling, chart-filled room that looks like an army command post, with drawings of Mafia family trees from all over the United States, volumes on the history of the Mafia in Europe and America, and files crammed with pinpointed facts, such as Joe Seeker observed in conversation with Angelo Polizzi in the parking lot of Santa Anita racetrack, with cross-references to similar previous conversations. The intelligence division knows the precise whereabouts of every Mafia member in Southern California and what he is doing at almost any given time. It uses round-the-clock surveillance, electronic devices, informers, and undercover agents to keep track of its foes. Through a remarkable organization called LELU, Law Enforcement Intelligence Units, which it helped create, it has trusted police specialists all over the United States who tip it off whenever a Mafia member from another area heads for California. Only rarely does it fail to spot a mafioso the moment he sets foot in the forbidden territory. The intelligence division even has a hotline from Mafia-ridden Las Vegas, 1 hour away by plane, and it keeps a permanent reception committee at the airport, meeting all airliners from Vegas. Intelligence division officers are almost always on hand any time there is an opportunity to harass a visiting or resident mafioso. In 1951, for example, Philadelphia's Blinky Palermo was waiting for a plane at the Los Angeles airport. He wandered over to a newsstand and, his larcenous nature being what it is, he walked off without paying for 80 cents worth of candy and papers. Suddenly, 2 intelligence officers appeared and arrested him for petty theft. Palermo, who was in 1951, for example, Philadelphia's Blinky Palermo was waiting for a plane at the Los Angeles airport. He wandered over to a newsstand and, his larcenous nature being what it is, he walked off without paying for 80 cents worth of candy and papers. Suddenly, 2 intelligence officers appeared and arrested him for petty theft. Palermo, who was unused to such treatment by the police back home, threatened and blustered. He then called a movie actor friend to bail him out. "Who made the pinch?" asked the actor. "Some guys from what they call the intelligence division," said Blinky. "Oh no," said the actor with finality, and Palermo had to stay in a cell until he could raise his bail elsewhere. In the same year, the intelligence division was keeping an eye on another distinguished Mafia visitor. Gus Alex, identified in congressional testimony as an underboss in charge of vice in downtown Chicago. Alex had been arrested more than 100 times in Chicago, but for some peculiar reason, there was not a single police identification photo of him in existence. "We must rectify that," Lieutenant Marion Phillips of Los Angeles Intelligence told his men. "Let's see what we have in the file on him." The officers searched the file, and they produced a 5-year-old Los Angeles traffic ticket that Alex had ignored on a previous visit. Within an hour or so, Sergeant Robert Devon and William Unland had obtained a warrant for Alex's arrest on the $10 violation. The warrant gave them the authority to enter the Los Angeles home of Alex's mother-in-law, and there they found the dapper thug hiding in a closet behind a rack of women's clothes. They took Alex to police headquarters and made a mugshot, copies of which have now been added to every police identification file in the United States. Los Angeles internationally famous police chief William H. Parker, often mentioned as a candidate to succeed J. Edgar Hoover as director of the FBI, describes his war against the Mafia in vivid terms. "The intelligence division," he says, "is the spearhead of my offensive force." The opportunity for a coup arose when Frankie Carbo, the Mafia's unofficial czar of boxing, tried to get a piece of a new welterweight champion, Don Jordan. Carbo agreed with Los Angeles boxing promoter Jackie Leonard that the piece would be 15%. However, Leonard had neglected to get the agreement of Jordan's managers, Don Nesseth and Jackie McCoy. They refused to have any part of the deal arranged by Leonard, saying he had no right to speak for them, and this put Leonard in a difficult position with Carbo. First, Carbo phoned Leonard from his headquarters in Miami telling him, "You're going to be hurt. And when I mean hurt, I mean dead." Then there was a series of meetings in Los Angeles, at which the recalcitrant promoter and managers were intimidated by Carbo's emissaries, headed by Mafia hoodlum Blinky Palermo of Philadelphia. At one of the meetings, a Los Angeles Mafia enforcer named Joe Seeker made some threats. This was unfortunate for Seeker and the other Carbo emissaries, because both Leonard and his office had been wired with miniature radio transmitters by electronics experts from the intelligence division. Every word of the conversation was being tape-recorded a block or so away. Included in the recorded dialogue was a remarkable description of Mafia mayhem technique, reported here verbatim. "See what they do? Do they use a water pipe, see? You know, regular lead water pipe. Lead pipe. And about that short. About that thick. And do they just get an ordinary piece of newspaper, see? Newspaper does not show fingerprints. Then they take it, and they wrap it up just in the newspaper, see? And you are sitting in a crowd. And they try to give you 2 bats, and they kill you with 2 if they can. But they whack you twice and split your skull and knock you unconscious. And they just drop the pipe wrapped in the newspaper, and in the crowd, nobody knows who did it." This evidence and much more were turned over to the FBI by the Intelligence Division, and the case was heard in federal court in 1961. It resulted in a disaster for the National Mafia organization. Carbo, immune to justice for more than 2 decades, received a 25-year sentence for extortion and conspiracy. Joe Seeker, the enforcer, who was also the Los Angeles caporegim or underboss, got 20 years. Palermo was put away for 15 years. The case against Louis Tom Dragna, also accused in intimidation, was weaker, and his 5-year term was eventually reversed on appeal. The intelligence division is primarily made up of men who have already proved themselves in other branches of the police department. Most of them are well educated. Inspector Darrell Gates, who until very recently headed the division, was an economics major at the University of Southern California, earned a BS in public administration, and took 2 years of graduate studies. Still, no matter what a man's education or experience, it takes about a year to train him properly to be an intelligence division agent. He must not only acquire specialized knowledge in a wide number of fields, but also learn undercover techniques and develop underworld informants. The Mafia is afraid of our department, Chief Parker says. That's why we have so little trouble with them. But it is not only our offensive arm, the intelligence division, that frightens them. It is also our defensive arm, the Bureau of Internal Affairs. It is a historical fact that the Mafia cannot operate in a city unless they are in league with corrupt policemen who look the other way and let them function. It is the job of the Bureau of Internal Affairs to make sure that we have no corrupt policemen, and they do their job well. With any group of 5,000 men, you are bound to get a bad apple every once in a while, and we do get them. But we find them, and we deal with them. And the Mafia has learnt time and again that there's no way of dealing with us. Not long ago, for example, the Bureau of Internal Affairs, called the Headhunter Detail by the other police officers, uncovered an ingenious plot which, if it had succeeded, could have subverted the entire police department. On February 15, 1964, a policeman on the Administrative Vice Squad, named Henry de Maddalena, took his young partner, Joseph Gunn, aside and proposed that Gunn take part in a scheme to protect a group of bookies. For this, de Maddalena said, Gunn would be paid $200 on the 15th of every month. He gave Gunn a $50 bill as a token of good faith and explained that all he had to do was to sound a warning by calling a series of private telephone numbers whenever the protected bookies were about to be raided. This is the exact method used for years by Mafia police alliances in such cities as Chicago and New Orleans. Both de Maddalena and Gunn are of Sicilian extraction, but Gunn was shocked by the proposal. He told de Maddalena he would think about it, then went directly to his commanding officer and told him the story. Almost immediately, he was whisked in to see Captain Sidney Mills, the head of the Bureau of Internal Affairs. That same day, Captain Mills had Gunn outfitted with a miniature tape recorder. He ordered Gunn to return to de Maddalena and pretend to go along with the plan, while with the help of the hidden tape recorder, the secret agents of the Bureau developed the evidence. The mobsters had researched the police department thoroughly and knew exactly where it was vulnerable. Their plan was to corrupt just one key man in each of 5 key offices, including both intelligence and internal affairs. With those 5 men, Chief Parker told me, they would have controlled the whole department. But again, Los Angeles's defenses held. The penetration had not gone beyond 2 of the 5 offices, Administrative Vice and Central Vice, when Mills's men closed in and made their arrests. With Officer Gunn as the principal witness, de Maddalena was indicted, along with Sergeant Peter E. Stafford of Central Vice and several bookies. All were convicted, and Stafford's commanding officer was dismissed from the force on charges of neglect of duty for not knowing what was going on. It was not always thus. As recently as 15 years ago, Los Angeles was just as mafia-ridden as any of the big eastern cities, and its police department was just as thoroughly infiltrated. Mafia members from Sicily were identified in Los Angeles as early as 1906, just a few years after the main Mafia migration into the eastern United States. In Southern California, their initial effort was an attempt to take over the fruit and vegetable businesses through murder and violence from law-abiding Italian and Sicilian immigrants. the mob expanded into what was to become its main business: extortion. With the arrival of Prohibition, the Los Angeles family of the Mafia moved into the lucrative business of bootlegging. In the 30s, when the Mafia was not yet strong enough to control organized crime from coast to coast, it formed alliances with such powerful Jewish mobsters as Louis Lepke Buchalter, the head of Murder, Incorporated, in New York. To strengthen the Mafia organization in Los Angeles, Buchalter and New York, Mafia boss Charles Lucky Luciano sent out Bugsy Siegel, an erratic but effective executive, to work with the local Mafia head, Jack Dragna. Under the Siegel-Dragna leadership, Los Angeles crime moved into its golden era. Gambling palaces flourished, gambling ships stood off the coast. Nearly all bars and nightclubs were under firm mob control. Relays of mob-owned prostitutes moved up and down the West Coast, and marijuana and heroin poured in freely from Tijuana, Mexico. The police were bribed to look the other way. Siegel was murdered on June 20, 1947, but the alliance with Mafia boss Dragna continued through Siegel's aide, Mickey Cohen. 2 years later, however, the mobsters ran into trouble. They had depended heavily on the cooperation of the Los Angeles police, but in 1949, 2 scandals hit the police department. First, it was discovered that some high-ranking police officials were in league with the notorious Madam Brenda Allen. Then came the revelation that members of the Gangster squad, who were supposed to be combating the mob, were having friendly dinners with Mickey Cohen in expensive restaurants and nightclubs, with Cohen graciously picking up the check. The public outcry over these disclosures resulted in the removal of C.B. Horrell as police chief, and the appointment of a tough retired Marine Corps General, William A. Horton, to clean up the mess. General Horton got rid of all the obvious bad eggs in the department. He was prevented by civil service law from serving more than a year as chief, however, and he began to look around for a successor. Wherever he went, he heard about a rebellious, cantankerous, scrupulously honest inspector named William H. Parker. Then in his early 40s, Parker had refused to knuckle under to the sometimes questionable practices of his superiors, and he would go out into the street and arrest prostitutes and hoodlums himself if his men seemed to be shirking their duty. Parker had joined the Los Angeles police force in 1927 and had earned his law degree from the Los Angeles College of Law by studying at night. In World War II, General Dwight D. Eisenhower had put Parker in charge of developing the police and prisons plan for the European invasion. After the war, Parker had set up democratic police systems for the cities of Munich and Frankfurt. General Horton jumped Parker over the heads of several other police officials and made him deputy chief. During Horton's 1-year tenure, Deputy Chief Parker founded the Bureau of Internal Affairs and revitalized the old Gangster squad into the elite force now known as the Intelligence Division. On August 9, 1950, Parker became chief. He has held the job ever since, through several changes of city administration. Chief Parker is hard-headed and tough to get along with, says the present mayor, Samuel Yorty, and he still steps on a lot of people's toes, but he's the best cop in the world. From the moment Parker took office as chief of police, the Mafia's influence in Southern California began to dissolve. Today, its resident members are just a scruffy band whose structure is weak. They have no crime organization of their own and seem to be relegated to doing favors locally, such as purchasing properties or intimidating people for Mafia bosses in other cities. The worst that is suspected of the Los Angeles Mafia is that it perhaps uses the national organization's communications and transportation facilities to move money from illegal activities out of the city for these other organized gangs for a fee. There is no Mafia stronghold in Los Angeles. The Intelligence Division believes that the leadership of the Mafia family in the city is split up.